Aziz is one of the co-founders of MEGI and co-director of the Centre for World Religions, Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution at the George Mason University. He's a National Geographic Emerging Explorer and one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. Well, someone mentioned that he was. We'll find out. Like, it's not my survey. He's pretty incredible. I'll stop now. I want Aziz to come up and share with us his story. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't like podiums because I think they separate people, so I'll just walk to here. Hopefully I don't make a problem for the camera. But it's a great being here. I'm having really a lot of fun. I travel a lot to conferences. I was telling somebody earlier, I normally go to conferences and get bored and try not to go to panels because they're boring. And this is one of the few conferences I've been going to everything. But there's another thing that's interesting about this conference, is that yesterday I met with Nir, who's the Israeli here. You know, I'm the Palestinian, he's the Israeli. We quickly started arguing. No, it was great because we've been told we should meet each other quite a few times by everybody around the world. And it took Danny to bring us here, so finally we can meet even though we live in the same city. So it's how it works. But we started negotiating as well, and we agreed that if I attend his session in the morning, he will attend my session in the afternoon. And we've been successful. This is how it works. Finally we've made peace. What I want to do first, before I tell you about my work, is tell you about myself a little bit. I grew up in Jerusalem, or just outside Jerusalem, in a Palestinian Muslim family, religious family. I was sent to a Muslim school growing up, actually to the Aqsa Mosque School, which is the holiest spot for Muslims in Jerusalem, where one of my relatives was one of the imams as well in the mosque. And I grew up with the conflict, not able to understand it really, because you're a little kid, you see things, but you don't understand what the heck is going on around you. And I remember I was 7 years old when things started going on for me. I was watching TV, and that's when the first Intifada uprising happened, and I'm watching TV and I see people throwing stones. And I watched that and I thought, this is pretty interesting. I didn't have much to do. My area didn't have many community centers or any at all. You finish a school and then you're free. So I saw people throwing stones and I thought, I should be doing that. That sounds like a fun activity. I went out, met with my friends, which were all, we were the gang of 6 and 7, 8-year-olds, and I told them what I thought, and they all thought it was a brilliant idea. Got together, went to the closest road, picked some stones, and started throwing stones at the cars passing by. Now, what nobody has told us is there's an Israeli-Palestinian thing, and we were supposed to throw stones at the enemy. So we ended up stoning our neighbors, which really doesn't work when they come home to your house at night because they know your family and you get spanked by your parents in the evening. But that's my growing up, is seeing this conflict quickly. And the first time we stoned our neighbors, the second time when you were to go and throw stones, I was probably 8 years old, first time I was shot at. And it stays with you. I remember, partly my fault, I did break the window of the bus. But that moment when you're shot at, it changes the whole way you think about things. But my life changed dramatically when I was 9 years old. A group of soldiers came into my house, which I shared, with my room I shared with my 4 brothers. I have 2 sisters and 4 brothers. And they came into my house about 4 or 5 in the morning after we got up to eat because of Ramadan, and just as we went to bed, they came over, interrogated my brothers, and decided to arrest my older brother, Taysir, for suspicion of throwing stones. We didn't know where he was, what's going to happen. For the next few days, we didn't have any information. Eventually, we figured out what he was suspected of, and he refused to confess, so he was beaten up so he would. He was sentenced for 1 year in prison, in which I saw him only once. We were able to visit him only 3 times, but when he got out of prison, He was already in a very bad health situation due to the beating. He had a liver failure, spleen failure, and a few days after he got out, he passed away in a hospital in Jerusalem. I was 10 years old when that happened. And put yourself in my place. Your brother is being killed. You don't really understand much, but you saw the soldiers who came and arrested him. And you feel very angry, very bitter, and I felt that the only thing I could do is revenge. I felt there were no choices other than revenge. It's kind of like if somebody punches you in the face. What do you do if somebody punches you in the face? Come on, be honest. What do you do if somebody punches you in the face? I've never had the answer before. Thank you. Most of us would react, right? Most of us, what do you want to do? Punch back, right? How many people you know, when they punched in the face, they say, wait a second, let me take 2 steps backward and think about this logically. What do I do? How many of us do that? Majority of us, if somebody hits you, you want to hit back, you want to hurt, and that's how I grew up. Taysir was my closest brother. I'm the youngest of 7, by the way. I'm what they call the oops child. My parents did not plan on having me. And I'm the little kid on the right. I know big difference in look. I used to be cute. No, that's what all my mother's friends normally say. But we were very close because my parents were tired of having children and raising them. So Taysir, who's the one just older than me, 9 years older than me, was in charge of raising me. And so I was angry, bitter. I wanted to revenge, and that's what I did for the next 8 years. I was working hard and got involved in politics, was mobilizing, was one of the youth leaders for Fatah Youth Movement in Jerusalem. I was 200 meters away from a Jewish school. We've never met or talked. We threw things at each other occasionally. But that was our really only interaction. My only interaction with Israelis or Jews were soldiers and settlers. It was mandatory to learn Hebrew in my high school, and I managed to go 3 years and now learn a 1 word in Hebrew. Just like Danny, I managed to pass through all my exams, which since in a university, I wouldn't tell you how I did that. But I finished high school as 18, and I didn't know what to do next, and realized living in Jerusalem and not speaking Hebrew is a problem. You can't go to college, you can't really work. So I started looking where to learn Hebrew, and the best place to learn Hebrew is Ulpan, which is where Jewish newcomers go to learn Hebrew, the immigrants to Israel. I was the only Palestinian sitting in a classroom wanting to learn the language, and I thought I had it all covered because I didn't want to talk to anybody, and I thought I'm going to learn the language without having any conversation, which is brilliant, and it doesn't work. And they put you in 3s and 4s, small groups, and we start talking to each other, and it was amazing because I realized the first time I had a conversation with somebody from the other side. First, it was not even political things that really made a difference for me. I'm the only Palestinian I know ever who likes country music, American country music, if you're wondering. Look, some of you already like, what the heck, country music? But in that classroom, I found somebody, and not that there are many Jews, by the way, who like country music, but in that classroom, there was one person who thought Johnny Cash was awesome, and I really liked that. So we started talking, and that's really how it started, just a normal conversation. But it went a lot deeper when we started talking about our lives and what I went through, what they went through, and realizing that we bought into this lie that we are so separate, that we built this wall, not the physical wall, but the other wall, the emotional wall of anger, of fear, of hatred, of ignorance, where you don't know what's on the other side, and if you don't know what's on the other side, then it's okay to hate it. Because you don't know it. It's okay to think they are less of a human beings when you don't know who they are. And then you can think my values are much higher than their values. And you can always find a justification why you're a better human being than somebody else. And I heard it from both Israelis and Palestinians. They shoot at children. Well, they blow up themselves. And then it's okay if we're less moral than we should be, if we're less ethical than we should be. And it's okay if we hate them because anyway, we don't know them. It was then also that I realized that I have a choice to make, that regardless of what other people do to you, you make your own choices. It is never an excuse to say, well, they did this to me and therefore this is what I'm going to do. you still have the power to make your own choices. And that was the beginning of my route toward change. I wanted to learn about the other. I wanted to learn about who are these people that I've been fighting with, small things or big things. Issues like the Holocaust, which as a Palestinian I've never learned about, never knew anything about. Taking myself to the Holocaust Museum, being the only Palestinian walking through the museum and thinking, what if they know and what am I doing here? But being willing to learn and being willing to listen. And after I did that, I wrote an article in a newspaper in Israel called Haaretz, and I talked about me trying to learn the narrative of the other side. And it was incredible the response I got. Normally when you're in a conflict, you go and tell people your story and you want to convince them you're right? Here I did exactly the opposite. I just said, I want to listen to your story. And the response I got was exactly opposite of the normal response of when you try to push your story on somebody else. I started getting emails and calls saying, because you've done this, it's really inspired us to do the same thing. What do you suggest we do to learn about your narrative and your story and your life as people? This is Rami, one of my friends who I met right after. Rami is an Israeli Jew. His daughter was killed in a suicide bombing in Jerusalem, and we both met through an organization that ended up sharing after, called the Bereaved Families Forum. 500 Israelis and Palestinians who lost family members in the conflict working together for change. This is his daughter, who was 13 years old when she was killed in September 97. From there, I started working in different organizations, but one thing I realized at some point is all these NGOs I was working with, I wanted to do some sustainable change, something that can tell the story of the two sides to ourselves, but also to people who come and visit. I studied religion and tourism in college, and I wanted to use these two things. And I was looking at how when people come and see our country, they get to either come with an Israeli company or with a Palestinian company, and they hear either a Palestinian told story or an Israeli story. And even if they don't, they come on a pilgrimage trip, they don't hear any story. They just see all the stones and the archaeology and the history, and they leave not knowing anybody. And I wanted, from that story that I grew up with, to do something different. So I started with two partners of mine. One is, both of them are Jewish Americans. The organization Majdi Social Enterprise. And what we wanted to do is to use tourism as a tool for peace. We wanted to use business as a whole as a tool for peace, but we wanted to start with tourism because we had background in it. The three of us work in conflict resolution at George Mason University, and we thought, tourism, there's 1 billion people travel every year internationally. It is it's the biggest exchange of people. To be able to reach to them would be much more influential than the dialogue even groups that we were having, because you're reaching a large scale and you're able to also make them pay for it, which is really good. This is from a recent trip we did with National Geographic, which is our new customer, and that's in the Mount of Olives. And one of the things we did to create a different model is when you go to Israel, Palestine, as I said, you have either an Israeli or a Palestinian tour guide. We have two. One Israeli and one Palestinian working together, giving the tour together. So if we're standing here in the Mount of Olives, the two tour guides will be telling their stories, and the Palestinian will look over the mosque and say, Jerusalem is important to us Muslims because, the mosque is here and the Prophet came here and this is our story. And then it'll go into more modern history and we'll talk about recent things in 1967, 1948. But he'll tell it from his own narrative and what his family has told him, what the Palestinians believe, what the Muslims believe, what the Christians believe. And then the Israeli will stand and talk about the temple and about the city of David just to the left. And if I'm there, I'll talk normally about the camel. This camel, Kozhik, is actually famous. If you go to the Mount of Olives, you have to say hi. But being able to do that, people get to hear the two narratives. People get to hear the two stories. But then not only hearing two stories, people get to experience different stories. This is a Muslim imam. The person on the right here is married to a pastor. Him and his wife came with us. And to go and have a Shabbat dinner and experience the Jewish tradition. This doesn't happen on normal tours. To be able to meet the people and learn how they live and experience their lives. Having an evangelical pastor going to the Western Wall with another rabbi who was showing him how do Jews pray and how do we do things. But what we decided also to do when we started working in Israel and Palestine, we decided to see if we can work in other places. So last year we started running trips to Egypt. And we had, our first group was an evangelical Christian group from Washington, D.C. And we set up this trip where they did the pyramids and the Sphinx and all the normal sites that everybody wants to do. But also, they wanted to see the people, and they wanted to see the people they normally hear about, those, the Muslim community, the religious Muslim community. This is a Salafi leader, which is, everybody knows what's a Salafi? Because that would be long to try to explain. Just Google it. This is a Salafi leader who's hosted, his wife normally with a burqa, you can only see her eyes, who hosted the whole group to have lunch with his family. In Egypt, you have to have police with you all the time when you have a tour group. The police were not happy that we made this trip. They're not used to people meeting locals. And we spent a whole day in dialogue, a Christian-Muslim dialogue on the trip, where they exchanged ideas, had some arguments, because in the Middle East, that is a given. This is a dual narrative tour that we started to do in Turkey and northern Iraq as well, which talking about the Kurdish issues, Turks, and trying to go between the two sides. By the way, talking about business opportunities, business has been one of the most instrumental things in creating relationships between Turkey and northern Iraq. If you look at the investments that have been going into northern Iraq, it's been majorly or mainly Turkish investments. And now as northern Iraq, Kurdistan area is having a problem with the main government in Baghdad, Turkey is actually siding for the first time with the Kurds, not with the government. If this happens 10 years ago, they would have sided with Baghdad. And it shows you how much the importance of business to peace building. This is a group of American and Syrian students in Damascus. We take a lot of students, and this was a joint study program that we had in Damascus, which we cannot run anymore at this moment. People being too afraid to go for some reason. This is back to Israel, and this is taking a group to see the rockets in Sderot, go to the wall. We don't hide from controversial issues. We go after controversial issues, but we also try to bring hope. It's not only about bad things that's happening there, but also about good things. We also try to find the people that nobody ever talks to, like the Druze community, which is, anybody here heard of the Druze community? Not bad, 7 or 8. It's an amazing community, and in Israel, it's an important community. It's an offspring of Islam, and they serve in the Israeli army, even though their native tongue is Arabic. They serve in the Israeli army. This family that we visit a lot, 2 of their children were killed as soldiers in the army, and her brother was killed also as a soldier in the army. And when he was called by the media to comment on it, his response was, I wanna give condolences to the family of the person who killed my son because he was killed as well. Because I know they're also suffering as much as we are. So I bring people to meet him because this is what inspires hope. People who've suffered but still understand that our tears are as bitter, our blood is the same color, and we hurt exactly the same. This is a group volunteering, another rabbi volunteering in an Arab school. Well, it wasn't this. I'm thinking this is a microphone. This is a group at the end of the trip planting a tree. And I want to end with telling you a couple things. One is, when we started this Majdi, we didn't know how big it's going to go. We've had 60 trips in 3 years. It's slowly becoming more and more sustainable. It's doing really good, and we're hoping to grow it all over the world, not only in conflict areas, but eventually everywhere, because everywhere you go, there are stories that are not told. And if we can reach those 1 billion people traveling and make a real intercultural exchange, imagine what could happen in this world. But we wanted to do it as a model as well. So as I mentioned earlier, I work in a university. I'm good on time, right? So I didn't see the 5. I'm thinking maybe it's been for a while, so I can go forever. I work in a university, and we wanted to use a model to prove that business could be used as a way of bringing peace, that enterprises, social innovation, these ideas should be used for bringing peace. And you know, when we first brought it up, not many people cared about it. But now that we've been successful in implementing it and showing results out of these trips, I mean, the amazing stories that happen, like I took a Jewish group from Chicago with their rabbi, and he said, I want to go and spend 2 days with Palestinian refugees. Doesn't happen. We want to sleep in their homes, live with them, just see what they do. And reluctantly, I agree. They stayed there for 2 days. I come and pick them up on the 3rd day. The Muslim Palestinians coming out, hugging and kissing these Jewish group that's leaving. Most of them are very conservative with the head covers. And you see them crying, and I'm thinking, when was it the last time you've seen a Palestinian crying when a Jew is leaving their home? It doesn't happen. It does have a social impact. That's incredible. I've had recently a group of business community, business people who came and met with a lot of people and now are investing either in the organizations they met or in different business ideas that they have in the region. So bringing those people over and over is making a change. And we're able to measure it and say, here are some examples of what happened. People who moved to there, people who are working in some of the organizations there. And so we proposed a start of a program called Business and Conflict Resolution Program, which aims toward using business elements for conflict resolution. We started with the United States. We went and met with our governor in my universities in Virginia. We normally say Washington, D.C. because nobody cares about Virginia as much. But Virginia is considered one of the best places for business, even though Nir disagreed with me yesterday. It has a very low unemployment, it's considered good because not many regulations, basically. But I went and met with our governor, they had already a program of business between Israel and the United States or Virginia, and said, what if we work together and bringing Israeli and Palestinian joint ventures together? What would you do to help them? And he promised the following. If 2 businesses, a Palestinian and Israeli, come together, we will help them find a third party in the United States that will work with them, help them open markets in America. If they're working in Virginia, we will try to waive taxes, try to waive restrictions just for those businesses so they can actually come to here. And the incentive that we're giving the Israeli and Palestinians to work together and do business together is incredible, because at the end of the day, if you look at the Israeli election or the American election, money does make a difference. And people who are in the business community are making a difference. And often it's negative difference. So to be able to bring them together and bring business people together who will say, yes, peace is good because it will influence our work in a positive way. We can do joint work together. We shouldn't keep doing this. I have 1 minute? Thank you. So what can you do to make a difference? You know, we can talk about others a lot, but I like to always go back to when I went to speak, one of the projects that bereaved families used to do, or still does, going and talking to students in high schools. And I'd go to meeting hundreds of schools, tens of classrooms, and when we will meet with them, at the end, I will realize that the biggest problem is indifference. People not wanting to do something. It's nice, they can do it, you can do it, you can talk about it, you're the only Palestinian, you're the only good Israeli. And a story I heard really brings it back to home to me. It's by Amos Oz, an Israeli writer. And he says, if you're walking by and you see a building on fire, you have 3 things you can do, 3 options. The first one is you run away. which most people here might do that. You know, when people talk about business, you see a conflict area and you say, I don't want to deal with that. Social enterprise, let's go to an easier area to deal with it. This could burn me. If I deal with Israel, Palestine especially, that place is too politically problematic. Middle East, oh no. But if you run away, that's what most people do, and then everybody in that building would die. The second option is to create a committee that will decide who to blame. Who started this fire first? And by, you know, many of us do that, unfortunately. Which side would you like to take? Which side started it? But if you do that, by the end, when you find out who did it, or decide who did it, everybody in that building would be dead as well. The third option would be getting a bucket, fill it with water, and going and throwing the water on the fire. And if you don't get a bucket, you get a cup. You fill it with water and you throw it on the fire. If you don't get a cup, any ideas? You get a spoon. You fill it with water and you throw it on the fire. Now, I'm not naive to believe that one person with a spoon can really make the whole difference. But if everybody takes their spoons and if everybody here thinks, what can I do to make a difference, then we definitely can make it. Thank you.
We now have Juliana Rotisch, who arrived today. So it's very exciting to welcome to the conference this morning. And again, Juliana was born in Kenya and then went over to the United States and became an IT expert and worked in that field, which is incredibly fitting for the organisation that she co-founded, which is called Ushahidi, which is a Swahili word for testimony, for witness, sorry. But we'll hear a lot more about her story. It's an incredible organisation that's really, again, showing how we don't have to shy away, like Aziz said, from those places that are scary and dangerous, and when the fire is burning, we don't run, but we run away, but we run directly for it. So, Juliana.
Like Danny said, ushahidi is the Swahili word for witness, actually, or testimony. It means both. And I'll just give you, I'll share with you the story of ushahidi, how we got started, and where we are now. I used this picture that was taken by Yasuhoshi Chiba in early 2008 to illustrate the situation in Kenya at the time. 2007, 2006, the Kenyan economy had been growing very well. I had a very unconventional way of telling how things are in Kenya, and that's by how long it would take to get my luggage. I was actually at home for holidays. So it was supposed to be a happy occasion, spending time with family. And the election happened to be going on, and nobody expected things to go this way. Nobody expected things to deteriorate. Nobody expected a contentious election. And the economists did not mince words when they called it a civilian coup. Because by and large, Kenya had been a very peaceful country, surrounded by conflict. Now, I was in Eldoret, which was one of the flashpoints of violence, and at the time, it was very difficult to wrap your mind around what was going on. I'd never lived in a country where, first of all, we were running out of food. You would go to the supermarket and, you know, the place was ransacked, there was no food. And you were running out of mobile phone credit. I couldn't reach some of my family members. I didn't know where they were because they were supposed to be driving over so we could take a flight back to Nairobi and then back to, at that time I was living in Chicago. So it was very, very difficult. And I was really lucky because we were able to I was staying with my uncle and we were able to have access to the internet. It was super slow at the time because the fiber optic cables that currently connect East Africa to the rest of the world had not arrived yet. That happened in 2009. So uploading a picture or uploading a video to YouTube was a very torturous process. It was extremely slow. Try doing that on a GPRS connection. But that GPRS connection became very important to me and to the other co-founders of Ushahidi. Ori, my colleague, was in Nairobi, and she was writing about what was going on her blog. I was writing about what was going on in Eldoret on my blog. And David and Eric were in the US. Daudi was also in Kenya, and a few other people who are bloggers in this, sort of just a handful of bloggers who were writing about different things. But then when conflict happened, we came together and tried to wrap our heads around what was going on. And that's how we were able to get the site up in 4 days. The very first prototype, which I'll show you, was just a very basic site. It was, we used ASP technology from Microsoft. Whether you're a Microsoft person or an Apple person, just, it was very, very simple, and it didn't take too much effort. What did take effort is to try and get more data into that very first prototype. So very quickly, we got the support of the blogging community. We did not have an ad budget. We did not place any ads in the paper. And at the end of it all, we were able to get more than 300 reports from around the country, even from places that we did not have a presence, places that myself, Ori, Daudi, and all my other colleagues, we were not there, but because we leveraged technology at the time, we were able to get a view, sort of a lay of the land of what was going on, and to create a map and a visualization of the flashpoints of violence. So this is our small little mashup. And mashup technology in 2008 had been there for years. It wasn't anything new. There had been mashups in Tunisia. There's a guy called Sami Ben Garbia, an amazing guy who runs a group blog called Nawat. And actually, he was very instrumental in covering the Tunisian revolution. And there were also other maps in Zimbabwe and other parts of Africa, as there were around the world. What was different, though, is because we were in Kenya, we absolutely needed a way to gather that information using SMS. And one of our advisors, well, he's still a friend of ours. His name is Ethan Zuckerman, and he'd been writing about Kenya, about Africa, about technology, and he told us, look, guys, this is something that you need to replicate or try and make this software usable so that other people do not have to start from scratch. We really didn't realize, because after about 2 weeks, we went back to our lives. I was able to get a flight out back to Chicago, and it was sort of life as usual. But then we kept on having a conversation with our friends that were supporting us at that time, and there was the need to share this technology and make it usable for other people. So what is Ushahidi? It is several things. Fundamentally, it's a piece of software that allows for crowdsourcing of information. This is gathering information using different sources. The very basic one we started with was the ability to send information via mobile phone, just a simple SMS, and via email and via web reports. It later has grown to the point where you can now pull in Twitter feeds. You can also interact with it on Facebook. And at the end of it all, you end up with a visualization of what is going on. It's also a community of developers, of mappers, of researchers around the world. If you had asked me, did you ever see this going beyond Kenya? I would say absolutely not. And if you had asked me whether you would see this being used in Ukraine and also in different parts of the world for corruption mapping, I did not envision that. And if you ask the other co-founders, I'm pretty sure they'd have the same answer. So how did it happen? Surprisingly, like the team that came together to start Ushahidi had none of the humanitarian experience that you would expect. And we did not wait for money. What we did was we just came together, sort of this spontaneous act of collaboration, if you want to call it. But then we assembled a team of people who cared, people who were fundamentally nerdy, but also wanted to put together their efforts for something to help other people. So, and because we're from Kenya, the default device is it's the mobile phone, because with 160 characters, it's actually 160 characters for you guys who are mostly on Twitter. Twitter is 140 characters, but for SMS, it's actually 160 characters. You can relay very, very useful information. For me, it was extremely life-saving because I was able to find out information about what was going on. And my colleagues were sending me information. So we wanted to be able to share that in near real time so that it could be useful for other people. And with 600 million mobile subscribers just in Africa alone, it's a channel that is extremely, it's become very, very important to think about if you have a social enterprise or any other business, how do you engage with people with the devices that they have in their pockets, in their purses, and the mobile phone has become that very important device, and it's been transformational in Africa. I can pay for my cab using my mobile money account. I can pay for a plane ticket. I can pay for groceries. How many of you here in Australia can do that? So sometimes the third world can be first when it comes to mobile technology. So I'll give you a few examples. When the earthquake happened in Japan, Hal Seki and the OpenStreetMap team in Japan, they'd already been using the platform just to play around with it, but then they fired it up and they were able to get so many reports. And because Japan was largely well connected in terms of mobile internet and also fiber optic cables, most of the reports came from Twitter. So recently, Clay Shirky described Ushahidi as not high tech or low tech, it's mixed tech. It's the idea that you can gather information from whichever device, and also you can repurpose it because it's open source, easy to deploy. You can use it from wherever you are in whatever context you would like. Closer to here, actually, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation used the Ushahidi platform to crowdsource information, and also during the Christchurch earthquake, again, the network of volunteers that had come together during Haiti provided assistance remotely to help visualize what was going on. So what happened was there was information from people in need. There was a lot that went into processing that information, translation, geolocation, and the Standby Task Force is a group of more than 300 volunteers around the world who've done this before, and sometimes they work with the United Nations to crowdsource information, for example, in Libya and in other countries. And they were very instrumental in a simulation of what would happen for the Kenyan elections upcoming in 2013, which we hope, the Ushahidi team hopes to, it's gathered some partners so that citizens can be able to indicate, hey, I went to the polling station today, the ballot boxes were fine, or I went to the polling station today and there are these problems or there's this threat. And the key thing that we would like to do is for each of those dots that appear on the map, because each of those dots are a single story, that if you can find, once we can find the signal from the noise, we're able to send it to law enforcement agencies who can act and assist and make sure that there isn't violence. So because we're very nerdy, we wanted to make the process happen even faster. We were able to reduce the number of days that it took to get the Ushahidi platform going from 3 days to 3 hours and now to 3 minutes. So if you go to crowdmap.com, you're able to create your own map And the key thing here is that you don't have to start from scratch. You can use your resources and you can use your resources in building the community to help you gather the information, and also to figure out the partnerships that will result in action from the data that comes in. Since then, we've seen a lot of growth. There are many stories around the world, from corruption mapping to election monitoring, that show the impact of having disparate voices, even from rural areas, participate in actually complicating the narrative, because sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, this is the nature of the conflict. Oh, in Kenya, for example, that was another Rwanda. But if you listen to the crowd, there's wisdom there. They're not just the unwashed masses. There can be signal there. And in terms of verification, when we think about when you get more than 2 reports about the same thing, and if you have one that has a picture and then you have another one that indicates the location, you can have a corroboration and sort of a view of the truth from different angles. So we are in need of a lot of translations, because the world is global, and we absolutely understand the need to speak for the software to be available in different languages. We're now at about 32 languages, including Ukrainian, Macedonian, and some really beautiful scripts that I can't even tell which country it's from. But at the end of the day, it provides these tools in an easy-to-use format, so that in whatever language you speak, you can still crowdsource and you can try and make every voice count. So just really quickly, like I mentioned again, the technology is just the 10% of what goes into a crowdsourcing project. It's actually the other partnerships and the community that you build around an issue that will help to create the most impact. And most of all, there's this, it's called the pothole theory, and that is, you will most likely care about the pothole that is closest to you, and not so much the one that is farther away. So looking at your communities and figuring out what it is that you care about. There are mappers who are mapping, for example, in Kenya, there was a matatu strike. Matatu is these small vans that are integral for the transportation system in Kenya. And what happened is people were stranded. You know, the transportation system became a complete gridlock. But people started saying through Twitter that they need a ride, or they can offer a ride. So we were able to crowdsource that information and to create an archive of what was going on. And the other thing is to also work with trusted reporters. You can have unbounded crowdsourcing, where you're gathering information from all sources, but you can also have bounded crowdsourcing, where you're gathering information from a vetted group of people that can help you to corroborate information from the rest of the public. So to end, there are many ways that you can be part of the Ushahidi community, and either way, we love it when people take the idea of Ushahidi and repurpose it and create communities wherever they are to try and contextualize the problems that they face. The pothole that is near you, if you can figure out how to map it and how to connect that to local government, or if it's election monitoring, where you want to gather information about the process of elections, or any other fun thing. So it's not always just about very difficult, heavy things. It can also be about fun stuff. There's actually a burger map that utilizes the Ushahidi platform. If you go to burgermap.org, you'll be able to crowdsource information and indicate the place where you, if you had a good burger and if it had fries, or beer, or good soda.